Dear children, we will now discuss from the endogenic forces of the third lesson are changing Earth. As you can see on the whiteboard, I have marked, pinpointed a few points and we will do a quick recap of what we have studied under the endogenic forces. So if you observe in your book, figure 3.1, there can be two kinds of forces which cause changing on the earth, that is the endogenic forces and the exogenic forces. We will first discuss the endogenic forces, and as told to you during the previous classes, there can be two kinds of endogenic forces, sudden forces and diastropic forces. Sudden forces are those forces where an activity happens under the surface of the earth and it is a sudden activity. It is a quick activity and it causes certain changes on the surface of the earth. So under the sudden endogenic forces, we have already discussed the volcanic eruption. Let us quickly revise it. So volcanic eruption, earthquakes, landslides could be sudden endogenic forces. A volcanic eruption is the eruption of magma or lava from a volcanic mountain due to the heating up of the earth's surface. Under the lithosphere layer, there lies magma layer, which is in the state of liquid having molten rocks. When these molten rocks rise through a volcanic mountain, they burst out in the form of a volcanic eruption. You can check out figure 3.3 in your books for more reference. A volcanic eruption can be of three kinds: active, sleeping, and extinct. So depending upon their intensity or depending upon their frequency of eruption, a volcanic eruption could be an active one. For example, if a volcano keeps on having volcanic activity or if it keeps on erupting very frequently, such is an example of an active volcano. For example, Mount Etna in Italy is an example of an active or a living volcano. The next category that we had already discussed was the sleeping volcano. Sleeping or dormant. As a sleeping or a dormant volcano, as the name suggests, is such a volcano which is not in the active state right now, but there are chances that it will erupt in the near future. For example, Mount Vesuvius in Italy and very popular Mount Fujiyama in Japan are examples of sleeping volcano. The third one is an extinct volcano. As the name suggests, an extinct or a dead volcano is such a volcano which has not erupted in recent past and there are chances that it will not erupt ever in the future also. Now, why does this happen? This happens because the magma chamber through which the magma can rise inside a volcanic mountain has already been shut with the movement of lithospheric or tectonic plates. Certain example of an extinct or a dead volcano could be Mount Kilimanjaro in East Africa. It has also been observed in the history of volcanoes that certain volcanoes which were declared as extinct or dead erupted later on. So as such we say an extinct volcano is extinct to a certain years, but there are chances that it might erupt in future because all of it depends upon the movement of lithospheric plates which is not in human control. Now let us discuss about the earthquakes. An earthquake is also a sudden endogenic force. Earthquake occurs for about few seconds or for a minute or so and causes a lot of change on the surface of the earth. Therefore, an earthquake is also a sudden endogenic force. As you can see, it is written, a sudden vibration felt on the earth's surface is called an earthquake. Let us check it out by seeing the above mentioned diagram, which suggests how does an earthquake is felt on the surface of the earth. So whenever an earthquake arrives, it is first experienced below the lithosphere on the focus point. Focus point is that point on the earth's surface or below the earth's surface, you can say, from where the seismic waves or the seismic activities originate. These signs show out that the focus has felt the first shaking or movement, and it is sending it out in all the directions. Like a focus sends out the seismic activities in all the directions, similarly it sends the seismic activity upwards also. There lies the epicenter. An epicenter is a point which is directly above the focus. This is on top of lithosphere, whereas focus is below the lithosphere. So when a focus experiences sudden movement or sudden shaking, it sends out the signals to the epicenter. The closer you come to the epicenter point, you experience a larger quantum or intensity of an earthquake, and farther you go from the epicenter, the lesser earthquake activity you feel. So an epicenter would be that city or that town or that place which is just above the focus point. And from here, the earthquake will originate and the seismic activities will be sent into all the directions. The closer you come to the epicenter, more is the intensity of earthquake. The farther you go from the epicenter, lesser will be the intensity of earthquake. There are a few more points which can be seen just now with regards to an earthquake. Like the earthquake is a seismic activity. These activities are nothing but movements caused in the lithospheric plates. As told to you during the beginning of this lesson, that Earth's surface or lithospheric surface is made up of certain free floating or free moving tectonic plates. When these tectonic plates collide with each other, bang into each other, they cause these seismic activities, what we call an earthquake in a common language. The person who makes the study or who studies the earthquake is called a seismologist, and the instrument which is used to measure the earthquake intensity is called a seismograph. Now please pay attention to this diagram since it is not mentioned in your book. So that is why the picture which I have sent you in the group, you need to draw that particular picture and label it accordingly in your geography notebooks. Now let us see how does this seismograph works. Now here is an arrangement where this instrument, the seismograph, is attached to the lithospheric surface. This rod and the structure is fixed on land, and these instruments are usually fixed more in those areas which are more prone to an earthquake. For example, the region near the Pacific Ocean, usually there is a certain region near the Pacific Ocean which is also called the Pacific Ring of Fire. Now why it is called a Pacific Ring of Fire? Because such are the places where earthquakes are felt in more number as compared to the rest of the world. Or for example, you say Japan is one country where earthquakes are felt after every few days. So at all these places this arrangement is made possible. Otherwise also the seismographs are being fixed so that if an earthquake arrives at that particular place, we can find out, measure it, what was the intensity. So a rod is fixed to the land so that whenever a seismic activity starts, this particular instrument comes into being. A wire is put and a magnet is attached to it. Through this magnet, a weight is suspended and this weight is attached with a pen. This pen is constantly moving on what? It will move on this rotating drum. This rotating drum is more like a tissue paper roll. It will keep on rotating and certain marks will be made with this pen. Because this suspension is directly attached to the land, that is why when the earth will shake, this whole structure will also experience a motion or a movement, and through this pen will also move and it will create certain marks on the paper which is on this rotating drum. Now this can be measured with the help of a scale. There is a measuring unit, there is a measuring scale given to the seismic activity, and that is a Richter scale. A Richter scale ranges from 0 to 9. For example, if the paper which is taken out from this rotating drum has these kind of marks, situation A, it will show that it was a low intensity seismic wave. Or for example, in another situation, after a few minutes or after one day, if the earthquake arrives at the same place and this kind of marks are made on this rotating drum paper, it was a high intensity seismic wave. So can you see the difference between the two? This is showing a less haphazard or distorted graph, whereas this is a high intensity graph, which suggests that the Richter scale measures this earthquake near 9 and this earthquake near 0. So as closer you are to 0, you are experiencing less or no seismic activity, and as closer you are to 9, you are experiencing more seismic activity. In the news channels also, you might have heard or have seen that the earthquake which arrived at a particular place was at an intensity of 5.4 on Richter scale. So this will be between 0 to 9 depending upon what kind of graph we have actually received from this rotating drum. Then there is a case study which relates to a Chilean earthquake, which relates to an earthquake in Pakistan in the year 2005, and then they talked about the Gujarat's BHUJ earthquake on 26 January 2001. Our country, particularly the area Gujarat, experienced a very massive earthquake where a lot of destruction happened and several lives were destroyed. For this, you can check out the case study which is given in the green box in your book. And then the government was actually not prepared for the calamity to happen. Therefore, a lot of damage was done, and even the rescue took a long time to start. Therefore, the government started the National Committee on Disaster Management, where they took measures to provide education and knowledge to people in order not to panic during the natural calamity situations, to provide certain trainings to people so that they know how to rescue themselves. And then there were certain things which were taken into consideration, like they observed changing animal behaviors, fishes jumping out of the water. So such instructions, such indications were taken into consideration to find out if a seismic activity is about to arrive. And if they felt like a seismic activity is about to arrive, they rescued people to a safer place. So this is how we come to the end of the discussion of earthquakes.